Welcome to Issues of Contemporary Politics with Dr. Brovkin playlist, and this one also will be Russian history playlist. Today, I'd like to talk about the German impressions and German perceptions of Russia. And this is based on my recent trip to Germany, to one of the major universities, where I talked about my book. I presented my book, From Vladimir Lenin to Vladimir Putin, Russia in Search of Its Identity. And I'd like to share with you some of the impressions which can be quite representative of the way quite a few of Germans think about Russia, about Putin, about what's going on and the future. To tell you the truth, I was very surprised because the last time uh, I was in Germany, I had very different reactions and very different um, responses. This was the time when there was Chancellor Schröder and President Putin talked about Verantwortungsgemeinschaft, which is a community of responsibility of Russia and Germany for peace. It was a time of great hopes of cooperation, of mutual investment, and all kinds of cooperative projects, including Nord Stream 2, which was then being built. In other words, it looked like Russia and Germany were going to be together. Especially this was true in 2003, when France, Russia, and Germany together opposed the US invasion of Iraq. But 20 years later, it looks everything totally, almost totally, exactly the opposite. So let me focus on what actually happened and what reactions there were. Now, my book has 11 chapters, and 10 of them are about Soviet history. There's quite a lot about the Civil War, and I spent a lot of time explaining to them, how my view of the Civil War is different and why the Bolsheviks won and the peasant resistance. And then I went on to discuss the missed opportunity of the new economic policies of capitalism under Russia's similarity to Deng Xiaoping and Chinese reform of the 1970s. And then I went on to explain, the Bolsheviks and the kulaks and why Stalin decided to get rid of both of these and the Bolsheviks and the peasants. And so I was just so going into new interpretations and the new evidence that I've collected. And then it was about the revival of Russian culture in the 1960s and 70s, and then about the age of reform and Gorbachev and why the Soviet Union collapsed. And then finally, I was getting to the topic of contemporary post-Soviet Russia, which of course I characterized as a total disaster of the 1990s, the corruption, the oligarchs, the sale of Russian factories to private owners and parking money overseas, the violence, the prostitution, the police in cahoots with the criminals. And my most important conclusion was the way things were in the 1990s was the worst decade in Russian history, except perhaps the mass murder under Stalin. And the point being that this is how Russian people perceived Western-style democracy. This was the kind of a lawlessness, including at the very top, and the drunk president that danced in Berlin being drunk while Soviet troops are being withdrawn. So this kind of a very negative picture of what Russia was under Western democracy is important to understanding what I told them. That later, the last chapter, only last chapter, is about Putin, and it shows that Russia revived like a phoenix, the bird that resurrects itself. On the cover of my book, I present Russia under Putin as a country that came back together again. And this was my thesis. Putin made Russia great again. And I gave them all kinds of statistics about the growth of this and improvement of that, and GDP and the birth rates and mothers and social services. They were absolutely stunned. They couldn't believe that there's a person in this world who could speak positively about Putin. Putin for them was a criminal. Putin for them was a Hitler. Putin for them was somebody who was a dictator. And they just couldn't understand how I could possibly have anything positive to say about Putin, but I did. But what's interesting is their reaction. They had nothing substantive to object to. And they started telling me, what about the empire? And I said, well, I'm not studying the empire. I'm studying the Russian society and how it changed. But what about the Ukraine? Well, if you want to talk about Ukraine, let's talk about Ukraine. And I told them that what I believed was the case, that the United States, after it saw a possibility of Germany, Russia, and France solidifying it is a common European position against American aggression in Iraq, decided to stop it. And the best way to stop it was to expand NATO, because the Germans wouldn't say anything against NATO. When they had a chance, they blew it at the end of the 1990s. So expanding of NATO, and then the decision of 2008 to include Ukraine and Georgia, and also to attract and rely upon the grievances and fears of the Baltic republics, which were forcibly incorporated into the USSR. And this was the way chosen to actually to torpedo the possible Russian-German cooperation. But they didn't see this way. The way, this is so surprising, young German students saw that it is Putin's fault. It is Putin's aggression. It is Putin's desire to restore the Soviet Union and the Soviet Empire, and they were obsessed with this idea of empire. And they kept telling me, what about Dagestan? What about Tatarstan? And so they seem to want to freedom and independence for all Russian minorities. But here's the trick. Then you ask him a question, what about Crimea? What about Donbass? If you view that Chechnya has a right to secede from Russia because it is oppressed nationality, why do you not then accept that Donbass has a right to secede from Ukraine? I mean, it's logical. No, that they wouldn't accept. They believe strongly that Crimea has to be Ukrainian because it's an international treaty, and because Russia has acknowledged inviolability of borders, and because Donbass must be Ukrainian. When you say, okay, wait a second, now, didn't they vote? There was a referendum. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It has to be international law. They have to stay with Ukraine. So I asked myself a question: why is it that that the national determination of oppressed nations works only one way, when it is against Russia, when it is to dismember Russia? And then I understood something I didn't tell them. I had this feeling that it is very similar to Yugoslavia. That Germany was interested in the breakup of Yugoslavia. It was a revival of the tragedies of the 1940s, when Croatia and Serbia would put one against another, when during the war it was Croatians who sided with the Germans and the Serbians were fighting against them. And this was like replayed 50 years later. And again, Germany favored Croatia, and Serbia was a bad guy just because it is Serbia, and Yugoslavia was destroyed, and small countries in its place were incorporated one by one into NATO, which means into European Union, and that means by implication German domination. So here with my reasoning now today is the reason that Germany is so much for Ukraine and so much against Russia and so much for any minority that they seek to free itself from Russian domination is because they want the same thing with Russia. They want to splinter it into smaller pieces that would be, together with the US, the Western elites would incorporate them and use them as they are using Ukraine with its BlackRock that is bought up all Ukrainian land and natural resources. So this seems to me the logical explanation. The Germans now turned into uh, dominating dominating power in Europe, and they are so much against Russia because they really share the view with the American globalist elites to break Russia into pieces, and then it would be more manageable, and then they would control it and exploit it and get their gas on the cheap and so forth. Now, so my question, of course, is this the only way? And hopefully not. I see other forces in Germany and also other forces in Europe and also other forces that are shaping up in Eastern Europe as well. Not only the kind of a virulent anti-Russianism of the Poles and the Baltic republics, but also a much more conciliatory and cooperative attitude of Hungary, Slovakia, obviously Serbia, Greece, and Italy, and other southern European countries. So it seems like Europe is split in its attitude to Russia and to Putin and to the future. If the globalists win, then what we will have is another Cold War. This would be a kind of realization of what Egon Bahr predicted. Egon Bahr was an advisor to Willy Brandt, one of the reformers and authors of the cooperation with Russia, Ostpolitik. And Egon Bahr said that if you do not incorporate Russia into free and open Europe after the end of the Cold War, what you're going to have is a Iron Curtain, or the wall moved from Berlin to the Polish border. And this is exactly what happened. And I told them, this professor who greeted me, this is what happened. He dismissed it. Simply the wall, a much bigger wall, actually is being constructed now on the Polish-Belarusian border. And if that is the way things are going to go, then Europe is going to rearm, as they're planning to by 1929. They're going to rearm Ukraine. They're going to rearm Poland. They're going to create a big European army that they hope in the future they will be, quote, to resist Russian aggression, in fact, to prepare for a new war. But hopefully there are others in Europe, and there are others who want to have normal relations, and these are some political parties in Germany, the Alternative for Germany, the Sarah Wagenknecht party, and there are other forces in Europe. And I will finish with interesting book that I just read by Emmanuel Todd, a French philosopher, the Decline of the West book, where he actually said a very interesting thing. He said that the defeat of NATO would be a liberation of Europe from American domination, and only then Europe would be free, when NATO is defeated, and the Russians may contribute to that, and that would be a new turn of events. In any case, whatever may be the ultimate outcome, I was astonished to see such virulently anti-Russian feeling in at least a part of Germany. Please write your comments, what you think about these impressions, whether you agree or not. I respond to most of your comments all the time, and I will look forward to it. Thank you, and until next time, goodbye.